Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com, and I am here with
Dr. Howie Jacobson of AskHowie.com.
We are happy to be here with you today. We should tell you that neither of us are medical doctors. We're the PhD type. This one is that nobody's coming to the rescue, Brian Tracy. If you sit in my seat for a few years, one thing will strike you beyond all others. Most people who struggle with their eating are waiting and hoping for something to work on them to help. It's probably a byproduct of our medicalized society where we've come to expect there's a pill for everything that ails us. People say, I really hope this works, or I'm praying I'm in the right place, or this is the last stop for me. I'm truly desperate for the right treatment. Moreover, passive language has become the norm. People say the binge happened at 4 o'clock rather than I chose to reverse my previous best intentions and binge at 4 o'clock. Or they'll say, the smell of the donuts in the bakery triggered me, rather than the smell of the donuts in the bakery reminded me of previous indulgences, and I chose to indulge once again, despite my previous best intentions and commitments. I know how it feels. I was there too. But the truth is, the most successful people in the over 2,000 people we work with, they haven't been successful because it worked for them or on them, but rather because they made a decision to make it work. They didn't hang around waiting for a miracle. They made the miracle happen themselves. They didn't assign causality to an outside force, and so they didn't have to hope things would get better for them. Rather, they realized nobody was coming to the rescue, seized the day, and took control. Defeat Your Cravings isn't a pill, a treatment, or a surgery. It's not something I do to you or perform on you. Rather, it's a well-organized system of codified common sense here waiting for you to use or not use at your will. The bad news is nobody's coming to the rescue. The good news is you can rescue yourself. What do you think?
I think that's pretty true. I've been thinking a lot about active and passive language, having been learning Spanish and realizing how much passive language there is embedded into certain linguistic patterns. And that we're, so if I want to say I like it, I say it pleases me, or it interests me.
Me gusta, yeah.
Yeah, me gusta, me interesa, me importa, it's important to me. I mean, I love Spanish, and it's got a lot of insight and brilliance in it, but it makes me glad to have a language that tends to be much more active and reflects agency.
Mm-hmm. I think it was Descartes that said, am I pronouncing his name correctly? I think he said, we like to believe that our thoughts are independent and we don't pay much shrift to the words we use to think them. That they're the byproduct of a civilization and a set of norms and a philosophy of life that's just embedded in the language. And without some serious thought about the language that you adopt, you're kind of blindly accepting those norms and behaviors and thinking patterns.
Yeah. The other thing is you're very generous to sort of attribute it to the medical model, which people apply to their food habits, like something's going to be done to them. But the people who are marketing diets and self-help very often are contributing because, we both learned marketing, and we both learned that there's a continuum from long, hard work on one end and take a magic pill and wake up sexy, thin, and rich tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's easier to sell sexy, thin, and rich tomorrow with no effort.
Yes. What people really want is a wake-up skinny pill. That's what they really want, and what they really need is to kind of settle in and learn a set of techniques and flood their body with nutrition on a regular basis at a small deficit if they want to lose weight. And it's not a sexy message. It's not a message that sells very well. You can maintain the fantasy that there is a wake up skinny pill. You can maintain that fantasy if you use passive language. Moreover, the passive language alleviates your sense of guilt or shame. It makes you feel like, well, it was the bakery's fault. This thing just happened to me. There's a little sense of psychological pain associated with saying, I chose to binge at 4 o'clock, or yes, the baker reminded me of my previous experience with sugar and flour and chocolate, but it was me who made the decision to reverse my best intentions and binge on it. By the way, there's many people have nothing wrong with eating from a bakery. I'm just thinking for someone who does. The ability of passive language to assuage your sense of guilt or shame is very seductive. It takes that pain away. But the problem is that we treat guilt and shame in the wrong way in the first place. The psychological function of guilt and shame is the same as the physical function of physical pain. It's supposed to get our attention so we can do something about it. And then once you have the attention and you know not to touch the hot stove again, you're entitled to take a pain reliever, right? There's no purpose to suffering anymore. It's kind of the same. We've talked about this before, turning guilt into responsibility. But in order to avoid that short period of psychological pain, people will adopt passive language for a lifetime. And the problem with that is it gives away your sense of power. It makes you feel like this is not a problem you can really solve. You just have to hope that you're lucky enough or some miracle happens, or you run into someone who's going to teach you how. It abdicates freedom and responsibility, which is a big abdication. It's a very serious letting go of your power, and it's the very power that you need to get better. So that's why I thought twice about talking about this, because I know that people don't like the message in some ways. But it was very helpful to me. It was a pivotal point in my own recovery when I realized nobody was coming to the rescue. And I hope that it will help some other people also.
Yeah, and from my perspective, not wanting to take responsibility and using that passive language or the external causality language, I appreciate that that's trying to protect me from something, right? It's trying to protect me from a form of suffering. So once I'm not like really disappointed in myself for that or angry at myself for that, I'm just going, yeah, I was doing this to protect myself. And as I look at it rationally, I can ask myself, is it worth it? Is the protection from this feeling of shame and guilt worth the continuation of the problem because I'm not doing anything about it?
Yeah.
I'm putting together some workshops on behavior change, and the metaphor that came up to me today, I've been doing things like on mapping and GPS, and I remember when I got my first GPS unit, it was an in-dashboard thing in the Toyota Prius, and it wasn't connected to the internet. It was the nav satellites. So pretty quickly, the map was out of date. It was on like a CD-ROM or a DVD-ROM or whatever, and you had to buy a new one. And they were really expensive, and it took like 6 months to get them in stock, and the dealer didn't know how to install them. So I just drove around with an old map for like 10 years, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And it was okay because the GPS screen was very small and my windshield was very big. But I think to myself, what if it had been reversed and the GPS screen was huge and the actual view of the outside was this little 3x5 low resolution screen just above the cigarette lighter.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the switch I want people to make. It's like the GPS that's telling you that you're driving through houses and is wrong. And let's make it real small. Let's be aware that your view of reality, the map that you're working with, isn't getting you where you want to go.
I love it. I always remember this one time there was a bridge down. I was trying to get to one of my nephew's piano recitals. And no matter what I did, the GPS kept taking me to the bridge because it didn't know that the bridge was down. It was a funny day. We got there on time. We managed to get there. So thank you, Howie. Is there anything else?
That's all for me.
Okay, that's all for me too.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.